Let's begin from the first chapter. Memory, its importance. It needs very little argument to convince the average thinking person of the great importance of memory. Even then, very few begin to realize just how important is the function of the mind that has to do with the retention of mental impressions. The first thought of the average person when asked to consider the importance of memory is its use in the affairs of everyday life along developed and cultivated lines as contrasted with the lesser degrees of its development. In short, one generally thinks of memory in its face of a good memory as contrasted with the opposite face of a poor memory. But there is a much broader and fuller meaning of the term than that of even this important phase. It is true that our success in our everyday business, profession, trade, or other occupation depends very materially upon the position of a good memory. Our value in any walk in life depends to a great extent upon the degree of memory we may have developed. Our memory of faces, names, facts, events, circumstances, and other things concerning our everyday work is the measure of our ability to accomplish our task. And in the social intercourse of man and woman, the position of retentive memory, well stocked with available facts, renders its possessor a desirable member of society. And in the higher activities of thought, the memory comes as an invaluable aid to us in marshalling the bits and sections of knowledge we may have acquired and passing them in review before our cognitive faculties. Thus does the soul review its mental positions. Memory is more than a good memory. It is the means whereby we perform the largest share of our mental work. All knowledge is but remembrance. Memory is a primary and fundamental faculty without which none other can work. The cement, the bitumen, the matrix in which the other faculties are embedded. Without it all, life and thought were an unrelated succession. There is no faculty of the mind that can bring its energy into effect unless the memory is stored with ideas for it to look upon. Memory is the cabinet of imagination, the treasury of reason, the registry of conscience, and the council chamber of thought. Immanuel Kant, the great German philosopher, pronounced memory to be the most wonderful of the faculties. Unless the mind possessed the power of treasuring up and recalling its past experience, no knowledge of any kind could be acquired. If every sensation, thought, or emotion passed entirely from the mind the moment it ceased to be present, then it would be as if it had not been, and it could not be recognized or named should it happen to return. Such a one would not only be without knowledge, without experience gathered from the past, but also without purpose, aim, or plan regarding the future, for these imply knowledge and require memory. Even voluntary motion or motion for a purpose could have no existence without memory, for memory is involved in every purpose. Not only the learning of the scholar, but the inspiration of the poet, the genius of the painter, the heroism of the warrior, all depends upon memory. Even consciousness itself could have no existence without memory, for every act of consciousness involves a change from a past state to a present. And did the past state vanish the moment it was past, there could be no consciousness of change. Memory, therefore, may be said to be involved in all conscious existence, a property of every conscious being. In the building of character and individuality, the memory plays an important part, for upon the strength of the impressions received and the firmness with which they are retained depends the fiber of character and individuality. Our experiences are indeed the stepping stones to greater attainments and at the same time our guides and protectors from danger. If the memory serves us well in this respect, we are saved the pain of repeating the mistakes of the past and may be profited by remembering and thus avoiding the mistakes of others. When memory is preternaturally defective, experience and knowledge will be deficient in proportion, and imprudent conduct and absurd opinion are the necessary consequence. A character retaining a feeble hold of bitter experience or genuine delight and unable to revive afterwards the impressions of the time, is in reality the victim of an intellectual weakness under the gaze of a moral weakness. To have constantly before us an estimate of the things that affects us, true to the reality, is one precious condition for having our will always stimulated with an accurate reference to our happiness. Thoroughly educated people in this respect can carry with them at all times the exact estimate of what they have enjoyed or suffered from every object that has ever affected them, and in case of encounter can present to the enemy as strong a front as if they were under the genuine impression. A full and accurate memory for pleasure or for pain is the intellectual basis both of prudence as regards self and sympathy as regards others. So, we see that the cultivation of the memory is far more than the cultivation and development of a single mental faculty. It is the cultivation and the development of our entire mental being, the development of ourselves. To many persons, the words memory, recollection, and remembrance have the same meaning, but there is a great difference in the exact shade of meaning of each term. The student of this book should make the distinction between the terms, for by so doing you will be better able to grasp the various points of advice and instruction discussed. Let us examine these terms. John Locke, the 18th century English philosopher, in his celebrated work, The Essay Concerning Human Understanding, has clearly stated the difference between the meaning of these several terms. He says, memory is the power to revive again in our minds those ideas which, after imprinting, have disappeared or have been laid aside out of sight. When an idea again recurs, without the operation of the like object on the external sensory, it is remembrance. If it be sought after by the mind, and with pain and endeavour found, and brought again into view, it is recollection. In other words, memory is the power of reproducing in the mind former impressions or percepts. Remembrance and recollection are the exercise of that power, the former being involuntary or spontaneous, the latter volitional. Remember, because we cannot help it, but we recollect only through positive effort. The act of remembering, taken by itself, is involuntary. In other words, when the mind remembers without having tried to remember, it acts spontaneously. In the narrow, contrasted senses of the two terms, we remember by chance but recollect by intention. And if the endeavor is successful, that which is reproduced becomes, by the very effort to bring it forth, more firmly entrenched in the mind than ever. The new psychology makes a little different distinction from that of Locke as given above. It uses the word memory not only in its sense of the power to revive, etc., but also in the sense of the activities of the mind which tend to receive and store away the various impressions of the senses and the ideas conceived by the mind to the end that they may be produced voluntarily or involuntarily thereafter. The distinction between remembrance and recollection as made by Locke is adopted as correct by the new psychology. It has long been recognized that the memory in all of its phases is capable of development, culture, training and guidance through intelligent exercise. Like any other faculty of mind or physical part, muscle or limb, it may be improved and strengthened. But until recent years, the entire efforts of these memory developers were directed to the strengthening of that phase of the memory known as recollection, which you will remember Locke defined as an idea or impression sought after by the mind and with pain and endeavour found and brought again into view. The new psychology goes much further than these, while pointing out the most improved and scientific methods for recollecting the impressions and ideas of the memory. It also gives instructions to the students in the use of the proper methods whereby the memory may be stored with clear and distinct impressions which will thereafter flow naturally and involuntarily into the field of consciousness when the mind is thinking upon the associated subject or line of thought, and which may also be recollected by a voluntary effort with far less expenditure of energy than under the old methods and systems. You will see these ideas carried out in details as we progressed with the various stages of the subject in this book. You will see that the first thing to do is to find something to remember, then to impress that things clearly and distinctly upon the receptive tablets of the memory, then to exercise the remembrance in the direction of bringing out the stored away facts of the memory, then to acquire the scientific methods of recollecting special items of memory that may be necessary at some special time. This is the natural method in memory cultivation as opposed to the artificial system. It is not only the development of memory but also development of the mind itself in several of its regions and phases of activity. It is not merely a method of recollecting but also a method of correct seeing, thinking and remembering. This method recognizes the truth of the verse of the poet Alexander Pope, who said, "Remembrance and reflections how allied, what thin partitions sense from thought divide."